Hello, everyone, and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, and we're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. Israeli warplanes carry out more airstrikes on at least 17 military installations in Syria. This as Israel expands its buffer zone in the war-torn nation as fighting between government forces and rebels continue. Greenland holds its parliamentary election today with 41,000 voters expected to cast their ballot. All 5 parties contesting the polls have promised Greenlanders independence from Denmark. The Republican-controlled House of Representatives looks to hold a vote on averting a partial government shutdown today. Lawmakers have until Friday at midnight to keep the government open. Uganda deploys its special forces in South Sudan's capital, Juba, upon request from the South Sudanese president. The move comes after unrest brews in the country as a series of politicians were removed from their positions. And El Salvador signs a crypto regulation agreement with Paraguay, allowing the two countries to cooperate on crypto mining and trading. El Salvador leads the crypto revolution in South America and has a similar agreement with Argentina. We begin on Wall Street today, where President Donald Trump's tariffs have spooked investors, wiping out $4 trillion in market value from the S&P 500. Amid the fears of recession and an economic downturn, investors are pulling out of the American stock market. In fact, on Monday, U.S. stocks plummeted, with the Dow dropping nearly 900 points, the S&P 500 losing 2.7% of its value, and the Nasdaq nosediving by 4%. The major sell-off came after President Trump gave an interview to Fox News on Sunday where he didn't rule out the possibility of a U.S. recession. Instead, President Trump said the country was on a journey to long-term wealth and should brace for short-term shocks. The sell-off worsened as the president continued to threaten tariffs on trading partners while downplaying their impact on the U.S. economy.
The stock market had another bad day today. The S&P 500 was down almost 3%. It's about its worst day in 3 months. The issue today for the market is worries about the economy, and particularly how much damage President Donald Trump appears to be willing to sustain on the economy because of tariffs. Donald Trump wants to extract concessions from trading partners with tariffs, and the worry on Wall Street is that these tariffs will slow down the economy, make people and businesses less willing to spend.
Now, White House officials on Monday dismissed the idea of the economy shrinking as panic grew in the markets. Instead, they blamed any weaknesses in the U.S. economy on the former Biden administration. Meanwhile, stock markets across the world saw major sell-offs amid President Trump's tariffs. And on Tuesday, Asian markets opened in red and remained in the negative throughout the day. Amid the recession fears, billions of dollars were wiped out from the markets in Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and India.
Well, I think that, like you said, the Trump's interview saying that the economy is in transition clearly affected the markets. And I think the biggest reason was that I think initially when people saw the Trump tariff announcements, they seemed to be, I think, more like threats. And there seemed to be room for negotiation, and it seemed to be more of a bluff or a card that the administration could use to kind of get other countries to do what it wanted.
Now, to be clear, Donald Trump never apprised voters that his path to a golden America would mean dragging the country through recession. However, it looks like the president's economic policies will take Americans through more economic calamity, threatening employment and the livelihood of millions. And now moving to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, pro-Palestinian activist and Columbia University graduate Mahmoud Khalil, who helped lead campus protests against Israel's war in Gaza, was arrested last week. Originally a Palestinian refugee from Syria, Khalil is in the U.S. legally, yet ICE agents entered his home, revoked his green card, and took him into custody without warning. However, after widespread protests demanding his release, a federal judge has now blocked Khalil's deportation. But with President Trump threatening first of many arrest warning, the fight is far from over. Here's more in our next report.
Release Mahmoud Khalil now! Release Mahmoud Khalil!
A storm is brewing at Columbia University. Mahmoud Khalil, a pro-Palestinian activist and prominent face of last year's campus protests, was arrested on Saturday night in a dramatic ICE raid. The arrest, shrouded in confusion and controversy, has set off a firestorm of criticism and legal battles.
When do we want it?
Just because this person was organizing in support of Palestine, I think it's just like a gross, blatant display of just extrajudicial presidential power that's really terrifying to me. So I feel like my husband's an immigrant. I just feel very, very moved by this in a way that feels very personal.
Khalil's attorney claimed that the federal agents arrived unannounced at his doorstep. The officials claimed to revoke Khalil's student visa. But when officials were pointed out that he was a green card holder, agents pivoted, saying they were revoking that instead.
They're justifying it based on an executive order that Trump issued that would authorize the DHS to use the Immigration Act to go after students who've protested in the context of the Gaza conflict. But an executive order cannot change the law. We do have a statute, and it bears repeating, where the government has a heavy burden to establish through clear and convincing evidence that the green card holder is deportable under one of the grounds of deportation in the Immigration and Nationality Act.
Khalil's wife, who is 8 months pregnant, has now released a statement via his attorney, demanding to bring Mahmoud home. She even called Khalil's ICE transfer out of New York City a blatantly improper but familiar tactic.
Political speech or speaking out should never be the basis of punishment or lead to deportation. And what's more, Mr. Khalil, like every other green card holder, has a right to due process of law.
Khalil had become a key figure in student protests demanding Columbia divest from companies linked to Israel.
Now the climate on campus has changed. A lot of students before, they were scared of the university intimidation tactics, because the university has used and has unleashed a lot of scary tactics.
His activism placed him under scrutiny from Columbia's newly formed Office of Institutional Equity, which had been investigating students critical of Israel. Khalil faced 13 allegations, many tied to social media posts that he insists he never made.
If you notice, the first day when the students were at the other lawn of this university before the police came and arrested them, there were about 100 students inside. Today, as we can see, there's much more than that. The university climate has changed, and now we're more and more confident that we're able to achieve our demands.
And when classes resumed in September, he vowed the protests would continue as long as the university benefited from what he called Israeli apartheid. His vocal stance made him a target for right-wing groups and pro-Israel activists who pressured the administration to take action.
Yes, so yesterday we had a very long session with the university negotiators. We spent 11 hours in the negotiation room. Today we spent about an hour as well. Clearly, there are, as Sueda mentioned, we are at a stage where kind of an impasse. The university is not acknowledging the movement and the extent of the movement, and what they're willing to offer is mostly just the statements, processes, and committees.
Last week, Colombia announced a massive funding cut from the federal government, which is about $400 million after the Trump administration accused the school of failing to combat anti-Semitism.
Canceling these taxpayer funds is our strongest signal, yet that the federal government is not going to be party to an educational institution like Colombia that does not protect Jewish students and staff.
Khalil's arrest was just the beginning, and the move has sparked national and international outcry, with protests erupting outside ICE's Manhattan office. Advocacy groups, civil rights organizations, and legal experts have condemned Khalil's arrest as politically motivated and legally dubious. His supporters argue that the administration is targeting Palestinian activists under the guise of national security, effectively punishing dissent.
Knowing that ICE agents especially can just come in, revoke your visa, and send you back home is going to have a massive silencing effect. People aren't going to protest nearly as much. People aren't going to open their mind nearly as much, or to just talk about what's going on nearly as much, because they're going to be afraid that they're going to face consequences that in any other circumstance is just totally unacceptable.
In response, Colombia issued new guidance affirming that ICE agents need a judicial warrant to access non-public areas, including student housing. But the damage had been done. As legal battles mount, a federal judge has intervened. District Judge Jesse Furman has temporarily blocked Khalil's deportation and set a Wednesday hearing to determine his fate. Will the courts stand by Khalil's rights, or is this the dawn of a new crackdown?
And now moving to Venezuela, where Nicolas Maduro has come up with a rebuttal against President Donald Trump's administration. The Maduro government has said Venezuela will stop receiving deportees from the United States in response to President Trump's decision to revoke Chevron's license to operate in the South American country. At an event in Caracas, without mentioning the company's name directly, Maduro said scheduled flights to bring home Venezuelan immigrants from the U.S. had been affected by unexplained tremendous commotion. In earlier remarks, Maduro said that if it was up to him, Chevron would in fact remain in Venezuela.
Now we have a problem because with all that U.S. did, they've harmed the communications we had opened. And I had an interest in the open communications because I wanted to bring all the Venezuelans they have unfairly jailed and prosecuted there just for being migrants. Being a migrant is not a crime. The persecution of migrants in the U.S. must end because migrants have dignity, family, and deserve human respect. Migrants' human rights must be respected. And this has affected the flights we've scheduled with our planes to bring back our migrant brothers and give them a warm hug when they're back in their land, as happened with the 3 planes that we brought back, 2 from El Paso, Texas, and 1 from Honduras. Then the U.S. objected to this. It's sad and terrible, this persecution against human beings who only sought a better economic future as a result of U.S. sanctions against our country.
Now, last week, the Trump administration reversed a key license for the Houston-based company, citing lack of progress on electoral reforms in Venezuela and migrant returns. According to reports, Maduro's officials privately warned the Trump administration they would halt the repatriation flights. The Trump administration Chevron a heavy blow to Maduro's autocratic regime, and it's likely to increase more pressure on him to bring in democratic reforms and accept more migrants from the U.S. Chevron is a key driver of Venezuela's growth, providing the country an economic lifeline. In fact, in recent years, the company ramped up production to supply about 20% of Venezuela's oil output, helping it tackle skyrocketing inflation by injecting hard currency into the private sector. Ending Chevron's production in Venezuela could eventually remove up to 200,000 barrels per day from the global oil market, much of which is shipped to the U.S. refineries on the Gulf Coast. Now, Maduro's latest decision could potentially trigger even more aggressive measures from the Trump administration. And Washington is also preparing to revoke waivers allowing other foreign oil companies to operate in Venezuela. The situation has been in a crisis since Maduro declared victory last year after elections were widely considered fraudulent. And this standoff with the Trump administration could plunge the Venezuelan economy back into darkness. Shifting the focus now to Europe, Ukraine launched one of its biggest attacks on Russia since the war began back in 2022. Troops sent hundreds of drones into enemy territory, with many even hitting Moscow. Russian military said that its air defenses shot down at least 337 drones across 10 regions, with Kursk being hit the hardest. Moscow was targeted with more than 70 drones, and at least one person died and several residential buildings were damaged in Moscow during Ukraine's extensive drone assault. The airspace was temporarily shut down for 6 airports near Moscow, causing major air traffic disruptions. Moscow's mayor reassured citizens, however, that most of the drones were shot down, but the sheer scale of the attack shows that Ukraine is pushing back, and hard. Meanwhile, other attacks were reported on Russian cities that border Ukraine. These cities include Belgorod and Novgorod, which saw major drone attacks. However, Russian special forces launched an operation to infiltrate Ukrainian positions, reclaiming large territories in the Kursk region. The daring campaign saw Russian troops crawl through a 10-mile oil pipeline as they crept behind Ukrainian positions.
The situation is very interesting and special. In the upcoming days, you will take part in a very serious operation aimed to change how this war goes.
Here, the American armored vehicle Bradley came here. Our birds, drones, hit it 2 times and completely destroyed the enemy's hardware.
Now, the escalation in fighting comes as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visits Saudi Arabia, where he met Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
We're looking at a lot of things. We have big meetings coming up, as you know, in Saudi Arabia. That's going to include Russia. It'll be Ukraine. We'll see if we can get something done. I'd like to get something done. A lot of people died this week, as you know, in Ukraine. Not only Ukrainians, but Russians. So I think everybody wants to see it get done. We're going to make a lot of progress, I believe, this week.
And peace negotiations continue in Saudi Arabia as the United States and Ukraine look to iron out their differences and stay united against Russia. But while the high-stakes meetings to end the war in Ukraine take place in Riyadh, the situation on the battlefield points to escalating tensions. And finally, staying in Europe, Romania is in the grips of political turmoil after election authorities banned the far-right pro-Russia candidate Colin Georgescu from contesting the presidential election in May. The country erupted and riots left Bucharest paralyzed. Georgescu has promised to contest the race and dismissed all allegations of colluding with Russians. As always, stepping into this murky political battle is none other than Elon Musk, who is vehemently urging Romanians to rally behind Georgescu. As Europe sees a rise in right-wing politics, is Romania possibly next? Our final report dives in.
Democracy, of the people, by the people, and for the people. Often praised as the governing mechanism of the free world, modern-day democracies have now evolved, where the push and pull in the corridor of power go far beyond voters. And this is what unraveling in Romania. On Sunday, the country's election authority banned far-right pro-Russia candidate Colin Georgescu from contesting in the presidential runoff in May. This came despite Georgescu winning the election in November last year. But the first round was cancelled by the country's constitutional court exactly a month after the results were announced. And Georgescu was blamed for colluding with Russia to win the election. He agreed to contest again and was leading in all the opinion polls. Then the electoral authority banned him from the May face-off, claiming they were protecting democracy. Instead, violent protests erupted across Romania. And the capital city of Bucharest was paralyzed by riots. Thousands protested outside the election authority's office. Stones were hurled, vehicles were overturned, and windows shattered. The riot police stepped in and clashed with demonstrators. Seeing the support from his well-wishers, Georgescu promised to fight the election authority and run for president.
We go together all the way for the same values: peace, democracy, freedom. I thank the Romanian people for everything they do, but I ask you once again, all in silence, all in peace, and in good knowledge of reality, the fact that we should not give birth to violence or other forms of this kind compared to how it was last night. We are moving forward with great confidence for the future of this country.
Meanwhile, thousands are now questioning the current government and their decision to support the banning of Georgescu from the runoff.
I know that Călin Georgescu was barred as a candidate. It is not a democratic way, it's just bullshit. It's a disgrace to the leadership of this country, and you see that Mr. Georgescu has different opinions, and that's why they didn't accept him. First of all, by the government coalition. Then there are many who don't like it.
If Georgescu was barred from running in presidential election yesterday, it means there is no democracy in our country. Democracy has been annulled, and we have nothing to look for here. We can't do anything at all.
Now, Georgescu has for long been a pro-Russia populist. He believes that Romania should maintain friendly relations with Putin and not follow Western Europe's anti-Moscow stance. However, his rise as Romania's prominent presidential face has not been without political interference. Georgescu is a 62-year-old agronomist who has prompted sustainability for years. He served as a diplomat from 2013 for nearly a decade before joining politics as an independent candidate in 2022. He won the 2024 presidential election with almost 23% of the vote, but his win was declared undemocratic and a rerun was announced for May this year. He was briefly detained by authorities in February for questioning. Before being released, Georgescu remains under criminal investigation on 6 counts, including being a member of a fascist organization, racism and xenophobia, promoting genocide against humans and war crimes, establishing anti-Semitic organizations, actions against the constitutional order, and communicating false information about campaign funding. Georgescu has denied all wrongdoings, as his popularity continues to surge not just in Romania but beyond as well. His most recent fan is none other than billionaire Elon Musk. After the Romanian's candidacy was banned, Musk was quick to show support for the pro-Russia candidate while questioning democracy in Romania. Musk's interactions around Georgescu have grown significantly on social media platform X in recent days. In fact, Georgescu and Musk were even supposed to meet in Bucharest this week. However, the Tesla CEO cancelled his visit after violent protests erupted yesterday. And it is not just Musk who's vouching for him. US Vice President J.D. Vance too has expressed support for the far-right candidate. Romania's constitutional court will rule on Georgescu's fate on Wednesday, though his supporters believe the ruling will not be in his favor, as Romania witnesses one of its most prominent political battles in recent times. Europe, the United States and Russia are closely watching the developments. As more Western nations elect right-wing leaders, the question remains, is Romania next? Or is this the new way of stopping the right-wing wave? By preventing populist leaders like Georgescu from contesting elections altogether.
That's Firstpost America for this Tuesday. I'm Eric Ham signing off right here in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in.